Well, hello everyone. It is that Weems guy here for finally another episode after several weeks of not putting one out. As you know, I've been punishing myself by making another trip through graduate school, and I have finished my first semester, so my first two classes. So I'm halfway through with the program, and I'm glad I got done with everything early last Sunday. I got it submitted 2 days before the deadline for this semester, and that's not unlike me. So it may have caused problems somewhere else around the world. It may have caused a tidal wave or a tsunami somewhere for messing with the way things go in the world. So I'm going to enjoy a few weeks of not having to spend all day Saturday and Sunday doing graduate school work. Plus, my classes that I teach are done for the session too. So I'm enjoying some free time, and so we get to put an episode out. And joining us today is Mr. Doug Deaton. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good, sir. How are you?
I am doing well. Doing well. If you would introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name is Doug Deaton. I'm from Texas. I'm 51 years old. I was a police officer in Texas for almost 26 years. I started out at a small agency. It was what they call a public safety agency, so police, firefighter, paramedic. I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I made the jump to the Plano Police Department in Plano, Texas, which is part of the DFW Metroplex. And I spent the rest of my career there. Retired about 2 years ago at the rank of lieutenant. Uh, City of Plano is roughly 300,000 people, right at the top of the Dallas area. Little over 400 sworn officers full time. And then, of course, quite a few support personnel, public safety officers that assist with field operations, but they're not sworn, etc. Full-time jail staff. You know, pretty much every kind of full-time specialized unit that you would expect from a fully developed police department. And so I was very, very lucky to work there. And at the time that I was there, it was a time of rapid expansion. A lot of big corporations moving in on the west side of town. A very diverse population. The older side of town on the east side. And everything in between. So sort of a crossroads of America. A lot of people moving in there from both east, west, and the north. And of course, some native Texans. A lot of foreign language speakers. So it was,
Mhm.
I got the full ride. It wasn't like I was working in South Central, LA or anything like that. It's a nice city, but it it afforded me a lot of wonderful opportunities in law enforcement that I would not have otherwise had, and so I'm really grateful to have worked there. Um, um, these days, I have a kind of a little one-man business. I'm a licensed private investigator in the state of Texas, but I really don't do a whole lot of that. What I do now is primarily litigation consulting for attorneys in both civil and criminal cases, and I primarily specialize in cases involving use of force, whether that's private citizen use of force or use of force committed by peace officers, regardless of whether it's state, federal, local. Incidents involving firearms, violence, cases in which somebody has been involved in a shooting of some kind, and or some kind of interpersonal violence, whether whether intentional or whether it's a claim of self-defense. Probably 95% of the cases I work on never go to court. And of course, I've only been doing this for a couple of years now, but I have been to court a few times already. And I was recently on a self-defense case out of Oregon, which resulted in a not guilty verdict. I was also on a capital murder of multiple persons case in the city of Dallas, and that also resulted in a finding of not guilty by a jury which actually had a sitting Dallas police sergeant on the jury.
Wow.
So that's pretty compelling. When the defense attorneys want a currently serving, sergeant from that same agency on that jury, that tells you something. Um, So I've been, been recognized as a use of force expert or firearms so-called expert in. I'll come back to that. I hate that word
Hmm.
expert, but
All right.
it's a legal term. So I'm recognized as a expert in criminal investigations, police procedure, use of force, and firearms in the state of Texas, and then recently the state of Oregon.
Okay. You mentioned most of the cases don't go to court. I've seen stats quoted anywhere between 1% and 3% of all arrests ever see the inside of the courtroom. The rest of them are disposed of otherwise. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely, that's been my experience throughout my career. And one of the cases I just worked on, one of the attorneys said that he was told, or his understanding, based on I guess that state's bar association, survey, was that it was roughly only 5% of cases ever make it into a courtroom. Now, yeah, I don't know if that included civil or criminal or what have you,
Right.
but 1 to 3% absolutely believable, especially on criminal cases. Usually, you know how it is. You get
Yeah.
reduced to something lower, or hey, we'll trade your felony for 2 misdemeanors, or
Hmm.
deferred adjudication, or some kind of super probation if you promise to go to some classes about how to not abuse your spouse any further, things like that. There's all kinds of ways to work a deal.
Yeah. The I'm going to say the criminal justice system because I really don't have a better term for it,
Right.
is geared towards dealing with actual criminals.
Right.
It is not geared towards dealing with people that are actually innocent of the crimes they have been accused of. And
That's true.
our system loves to talk about it's better that 10 guilty go free than one innocent go
Right.
to jail and everything. They love to say all that kind of
Sure.
thing,
Of course they do.
but that's just not the case. And I think prosecutors and even defense attorneys that defend guilty people
Hmm.
all typically know how the criminal side of it works, but there's very little education out there on the lawful use of self-defense. And I think most members of the bar, and I hate to use broad terms like most, but in my experience, members of the bar, to include all judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, everything like that, they generally have a poor understanding of lawful use of self-defense.
Absolutely, they do. It's been my experience that that is it's a nebulous area for them. They don't have any actual. Most of them have very little actual personal hands-on experience with in any kind of righteous use of force or violence to protect themselves or another person. Very little exposure to that, and then on top of that, and I think Masada Ayub is right when he talks about and I'm sure you've been in the same classes where he'll
Mm-hmm.
ask the attorneys in the room to stand up and then ask them, how much time did you spend on self-defense law when you were in law school? And I've never heard any of them say anything substantial. All of them were like, well, I remember one guy, I think the guy maybe a former judge, I mean some really experienced guy, and he was like, yeah, I spent about 15 minutes on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's probably joking, but he's probably not far off either. Um, and that's one of the things that I've been doing in this expert witness work is I've been tasked with or asked, hired to educate, literally to educate judges on some of these topics. Which is what you do when you write your reports.
Mm-hmm.
Write a professional opinion on these things and then testify on it. Many times it's to educate the judge themselves and or the jury as well. But I have been, I'd like to say that nothing surprises me a whole lot anymore, but I continue to be surprised at the level of genuine ignorance amongst prosecutors about the just the nuts and bolts of what happens when there's violence just between two individual people.
Yep.
And no, there's when I say ignorance, I mean that in the truest sense of the word. They don't know what they don't know, but we can all read it that state's penal code and then try to apply, try to drape that penal code of that law over this incident and think, well, this must be the right charge. That's clearly aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
Right.
And then once they dig their heels in on that, they're kind of like a dog on a bone. You're not going to get it away from them, and it's very
Right.
difficult to change their mind.
I have not done a lot of expert witness work. I've done a little. Um, the most recent case that I worked on was I actually worked for the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now I am still a serving peace officer in my state, and
Mm-hmm.
I took a day of leave to travel into a neighboring judicial circuit to testify for the defense in a murder case. And boy, I did not make fans in the DA's office
They don't
in
like
that
that.
in that circuit.
No. No.
he the DA is not a fan
Mm-hmm.
at all. Well, let's just say I mind my P's and Q's when I cross over into that circuit.
Oh yeah.
And the defense attorney is a former police officer and deputy sheriff. We actually worked together for 14 years.
Okay.
And then he went to law school. And he called me one day and said, I need some help on this case. He's the public defender defending an indigent client who is sitting in jail still because even though, if they give him bond, he didn't have the money to make bond.
Right.
So he's been sitting in jail and they're trying to get this case moving along. And in Georgia, you can do what's called a self-defense immunity hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to argue self-defense, you go if the judge rules that you did act in lawful self-defense, it then bars the prosecution from moving forward with your crime. And now, folks, what that means is you've already been arrested. This whole
Correct.
you're going to argue self-defense, that whole stuff. The immunity hearings do not get triggered unless there's been an arrest. And so he's been sitting in jail. He's arguing self-defense, claiming self-defense. We go for the hearing. When I get done with my testimony from the expert witness side for the defense, the judge calls a recess, and I get up and I walk over to the defense attorney's table. The deputy sheriff, who is actually serving in the courtroom as court security, walks over there with me. Now, here's a deputy sheriff who's probably in somewhere year 30 something. Right. By the looks of him. I was year 23 or 24 at the time this whole, the court procedure was taking place. The defense attorney had 14 years. So we've got 60, 70 years of law enforcement experience standing there, and the courtroom deputy looks at me and says, "Why on earth are we even here?
Wow.
Why is this guy charged?" And he ended up getting convicted of murder.
Wow. So that's the thing, is that you don't know which way it's going to go. Even when you have all those cops in there saying this is ridiculous, why was he even charged in the first place? Mm-hmm. You can still go to prison.
Yeah. The only thing I can figure as to why he was charged is because he basically was a pain in the posterior in the public housing complex that he was living in. And this was their chance to put him on ice for a while.
Sure.
And he did everything that we would all teach in a class as far as what to do post-shooting. And sometimes when I go to these classes or I see the discussions online or whatever, I just think people think that they're just magic words, that if you do these things and you say these things, that everything's going to be okay. And that the justice system's surely going to see that you acted lawfully, and you're going to be all right. And I got to tell you, this is one case that I've been in where I raised my hand and testified, trying to argue that this guy did not do what he was accused of, and he went to jail for murder.
Right. So it's in some instances, it's almost like, this is not necessarily a perfect comparison, but for those people who think that, and you are 100% right, Lee, there are a tremendous number of very good and decent citizens out there who erroneously believe that if they are the good guy, they say the right words, they act in the right way, that it's all going to turn out okay in the end. And you know what? Many times it does. But here's the comparison I would make. Every now and then, we get sick or we get an infection and we take those antibiotics exactly as we're told to, and that infection doesn't stop. In fact, it keeps growing. And then the doctor's like, oh, I don't, what am I supposed to do? Do you know what? We'll
Mhm.
try another one. And they try the other one. And next thing you know, half your leg's been eaten off by this thing, and
Yeah.
it's not working. And you're like, but
Mhm.
I took the medication exactly like you said to. Well, I know you did, Doug, but it's just, and we're trying so hard here, Doug, but it's just, for some reason, it's not working this
Yep.
time. And
Yep.
man, that happens. I worked on a case. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but I can say the case. And I really wish I could talk more about it, but I'll identify it. I was hired to work on the infamous case in Austin, Texas, where the Uber driver shot the BLM protester who approached his car with an AK-47. And I was hired to conduct some firearms testing and also to testify about that rifle and use of force and positioning and et cetera, and the performance of the 7.62 by 39 cartridge and bullet against automobiles. And I can just say that I cannot get over how that case ended up and how it worked out. And it's just incredible. The truth, we always like to say that the truth will set you free. And that is, most of the time that's true, but not always. Just like antibiotics don't
Yeah.
always work. And,
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, it just doesn't work out in your favor.
Yeah. My father died of an infection that went septic.
Right. Oh, wow. Wow.
And that's
Man.
just, that's a perfect analogy for what we're talking about here.
Well, again, it's so many things are outside of our control.
Hmm.
We can't, one of the things that I point out all the time to people is that as a private citizen or even as a police officer,
Hmm.
you're involved in a shooting.
Right.
We don't get to pick who that investigator is.
Hmm.
We don't get to pick the prosecutors on it. I mean, if you were a doctor, if you're a surgeon, right, and you knew you needed to have some serious surgery of some kind,
Hmm.
you would probably know, okay, I want this guy to do it. I don't want that guy to do it, right? Well, you don't get
Right.
that luxury in law enforcement, and you don't get that luxury when you're a citizen who's been involved in a shooting. And somebody could come out there and look like a living personification of a character from a Law and Order episode. It doesn't mean they're competent. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to follow up on all of the different leads that are available. It's shocking how lazy some investigators can be. They're much more about their image and their social appearance and all that than they are about tracking down actual facts, leads, and witnesses and evidence
Hmm.
that could set you free. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Lee, is the whole system is typically, for the most part, it's kind of set up to prosecute people. It's not set up to, on the front end, to exonerate people, even though
Yeah.
the best investigators I ever worked with, that's exactly what they did. I mean, a lot of them pointed out, look, I work harder to exonerate or to exonerate innocent people than I do to put, guilty people in prison. But not everybody's working with that mindset.
Yeah. That's a perfect way of describing it. You don't know who's going to roll to the call.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot of impact on how a case will go.
Yes.
And then you don't know who's going to be prosecuting it, which also has a lot of impact on how the case is going to go. To a certain extent, you get to choose your defense attorney unless you're having to rely on a public defender.
Right.
And that's not a slam on public defenders. I know a couple of them in my area that I'd rather have them than the
Yeah.
high priced defense
No,
attorneys in my
there
area.
there are some that are very good.
And but you look at the sheer number of volume of cases that they have, and we've only got so many hours in a day,
Right.
so much mental capacity, emotional capacity,
Right.
energy capacity, and even you go into the investigators. You could have the investigator that is incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
You could have one that is lazy. You could
Yes.
also have the investigator that is 100% jam up on wanting to do the right thing, and they just miss something.
That's right. I mean, people are,
or
they're
yeah,
not infallible. I mean, they just
right.
human beings make mistakes and overlook things.
If you've already been up 24 hours
That's right.
working a case and you're still the on-call detective for that cycle,
That's right.
and another one comes in and you go, well, people that have had extreme sleep deprivation are basically drunk.
That's right.
It's basically the equivalent. And is that who you want, you know, deciphering, or, is that the person that's going to go the extra mile of, hopefully they will, but they just may be so exhausted that they just don't go to every door and ask everybody in the neighborhood if they've got a ring camera and did it record,
Right.
where's the camera facing, and getting that way. There may be some piece of evidence that gets missed that would have exonerated the whole thing.
So the case that I worked on in Dallas, um, these detectives that worked on it had been up for 24 hours when they got the call for this particular incident. And that was the 13th homicide they had worked that week. So
Mm-hmm.
they were all tired. They were all dead on their feet. They were all extremely fatigued, psychologically and physically. And even the best teams out there that are under that kind of fatigue and under that kind of strain are highly likely to miss something. And that's a great,
Mm-hmm.
those are one those kind of instances is often where, uh, for example, it'd say, well, no, no, I didn't process that truck. Lee processed that truck. He took care of that. And then you would be like, no, Doug, no, no, I didn't
Yeah.
do, no, Doug took care of the truck. He said he was going to take care of the truck. I did. No, I swear I told Lee to take the truck and I would take the
Mm-hmm.
parking lot. And that's how you find out nobody processed the evidence in the truck or the parking lot. And then if it's not done, well, then you've lost that evidence and it could be exculpatory evidence and it's
Yep.
lost forever because of fatigue and just mere oversight and miscommunication.
Unfortunately, your means may have a very big impact on your defense as well. Because if you have enough means that you can hire your own investigator
Mm-hmm.
to go out and look for some of that exculpatory evidence that may have been overlooked by the actual governmental paid investigators, you may go free. Whereas
Right.
if you're an indigent and don't have the means to do that,
Right.
there's not a budget sitting out there to pay an investigator to go work your case for you on your
There
behalf.
no, there's no public, you get public defenders, but there's no public
Mm-hmm.
investigators necessarily. Um, in many states, I know some states do offer a little bit of that, but fact of the matter is you're just out of luck. A big part of what I do now is advising people on what's missing, looking at the gaps. So as I'm sure you understand, experienced guys can look at
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of pages of the police report, the evidence reports, toxicology, lab reports, ME's report, etc. Look at all the photos that were taken, but we will see what's not in there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, wait a minute. Where's this? Where's that? Why didn't they dump the phones of these three, witnesses who were actually probably criminal suspects?
Yeah.
Um, did you ask that question? And the attorneys oftentimes are like, what? No, I didn't know that. I didn't even think about that. So a lot of times attorneys hire
Yeah.
me to look at where these gaps are and to help them identify where to go and look for additional information.
Yeah. Thankfully, I worked in places that did not have the whole thing where you have 13 homicides in a week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
When,
it's
when,
bad.
when we had a murder, it was an all hands on deck. Everybody,
Mm-hmm.
that's our number one thing
Right.
until we get it put to bed. And even at then, just to avoid some of the things we're talking about, we would send an investigator home.
Yes.
You or when the whole call out was going out, we'd tell one to stay away from the scene, to
Mm-hmm.
go home and go to bed right then,
Yes.
and be wide awake, ready to roll the next morning. So we had fresh eyes to either hand off to, or we
Yes.
could run the case and see if we missed something
Right. And
for them.
that's one of those best practices in criminal investigations is, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're a leader, whether you're first line
Mm-hmm.
supervisor or you're that second line supervisor, a lieutenant,
Mm-hmm.
you need to make sure that you're not overworking this team. And
Yeah.
you got to have a scribe. somebody has got to be writing this stuff down and typically put it on a big whiteboard later and a big checklist to make sure what have we missed here. But yeah, you run those guys 24 hours a day, somebody's going to burn out and miss something.
Hmm. And it could be, again, we need to drive this point home, not out of any form of malice,
No,
not out of incompetence, not out of laziness, whatever. It's folks, there's humans doing this job.
that's correct. Many cases where people have been exonerated later. Many of those cases, it is later determined and proven that the missteps were not out of malice or corruption or because of some kind of
Hmm.
concerted campaign on the part of the police to put an innocent man in jail. It often came down to a lack of resources, a lack of
Yep.
training, a simple human error due to, again, oversight, being overworked, being understaffed, these common human errors that occur. And that sounds great with you and I sitting here talking about it. But if you're
Yep.
sitting, if you're an innocent guy sitting in jail, with $1 million bond, and that's the case. One of these cases I just worked on, $1 million
Hmm.
bond, and he sat in the Dallas County Jail for 18 months before his family could get him out. Um, and of course he didn't know that the police had not collected, extremely important evidence that would have
Hmm.
that would have exonerated him on the front end. Eventually, they hired me to work on that. But imagine the terror, that you and your family must be feeling, when you're sitting in jail. And again, it doesn't mean you're anti-police. I'm the most pro-police guy that I know. But you're right. Human beings make mistakes. It's not out of malice. It's almost always out because of some other reason.
Yep. The budget of the agencies that are investigating your case
Yes.
may come into play. I worked a hit and run wreck with injuries. And most places, you're not going to get a detective assigned to a hit and run case. So
Right.
that tells you how stuff goes.
Right.
But I,
Yeah.
I got assigned as a detective to a hit and run with injury. Um, Isolated it down to two suspects that I could prove were in the front seat of the vehicle
Mm-hmm.
that did the hitting and the running. I had blood in the passenger side floorboard of the suspect vehicle. I had the two people that I could prove were in the front seat of the vehicle. One was wearing sandals at the time of the incident and had cuts on his feet that were visible to the eye.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Neither one of the two front seat occupants would talk. Neither one of them would say I was, he was driving. Neither one of them would talk. So Doug is an experienced investigator. If I put the facts before you, and we're back, ladies and gentlemen, my Wi-Fi is giving me all kind of problems at home. And so I was using the hotspot on my cell phone.
Oh.
And for some reason, my iPad switched from the Wi-Fi on my phone, the hotspot on my phone, to the Wi-Fi in the house, and I dropped out of the meeting.
Oh man. Okay.
All
I'm
right.
glad it was you and not me.
All right. So here we are.
Okay.
I've got blood in the passenger side floorboard of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one guy who has cuts on his feet, and I can prove that he and another guy were in the front seat of the vehicle.
Okay.
Is that not enough probable cause to believe that the guy that had cuts on his feet and there's blood in the floorboard at the passenger side, that he's the one that was in the floorboard of the car? I mean, in the passenger side of the car.
Most likely it is, unless the other guy has cuts on his feet too.
Right. The other guy did not have cuts on his
Okay.
feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Then you're pretty solid. That's good PC.
All right. So I charged the other guy with being the driver,
Okay.
but I did not stop there. I took DNA evidence,
Mm-hmm.
DNA swabs from both people, got
Right.
warrants to get DNA from both, and sent it to the crime lab. And lo and behold, DNA comes back, and the blood in the floorboard actually belonged to the guy that I had charged as the driver. Then the passenger side floorboard belonged to the guy I charged as the driver.
Uh-oh.
If I had not done that
Mm-hmm.
step,
Right.
I believe I'd have gotten a conviction
Yes. Probably
on
so.
the other guy.
Yeah. And that DNA, like you mentioned, there's a lot of places that just do
Mm-hmm.
not have the money to pay for that kind of testing. They
And
just don't have it.
And thankfully, I worked for an agency that was absolutely maniacal about we're going to be right.
That's good.
And they insisted that you follow every step. And I didn't get any flack at all
Hmm.
about going and doing that warrant, collecting that evidence and sending it to the crime lab. Nobody questioned it.
Right.
It was expected of an investigator working for us, but that's the way we did things. And we would pay for that kind of stuff.
Right. And so that's one of the things I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. I was very lucky to work for the agency that I did because it was well funded enough that I mean, Plano could do that kind of testing on a
Yeah.
regular basis. It just I hate it's not really a luxury, especially if you're the one who's being charged, with a
Right.
crime. I mean, you would hope that the government would spare no expense in testing things to make sure that they do in fact have the right guy, and that they can positively link that evidence, to
Right.
the crime. But again, there are many places that simply do not have those resources or that budget. And so they do the very best they can with the evidence that they have, but there's just,
Hmm.
it's just ugly. They tell them, I'm sorry, Doug, there's no we exhausted our DNA testing budget on, the murder that occurred, in the first
Right.
quarter of this year. Our entire annual budget for DNA testing is now gone.
Right.
And that happens.
Right. I also saw in your CV that you are a graduate of force science.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to run a scenario by you that absolutely scares the bejesus out of me.
Okay.
Take all of that stuff that they taught you in the force science class
Mm-hmm.
about all the how memories are formed,
Mm-hmm.
why people don't remember things that happened to them in traumatic events,
Right.
etc. Apply those to a sexual assault victim.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it not stand that all that same stuff applies to them?
Oh, it absolutely applies.
And how many times have we taken the Imperial we
Mhm.
taken a report, start investigating, and there's some material fact that is not exactly as the reporting party describes.
Yes.
And well, she's lying or he's lying or whatever.
Right.
And we dropped how many, when I was sitting in the force science class and they were talking about all that, and I just sat back and thought, how many rapists are walking free right now because
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah. Right. And there's a great deal of research on that as well. And I was
Uh-huh.
exposed to quite a bit of that when I was, excuse me, in the family violence unit, because a lot of sexual assaults occurring there. But then later,
Uh-huh.
when I was a lieutenant over sex crimes, um, I was exposed to some more of that kind of research, and that research lines up very, very well with what force science has to say about poorly formed memories formed during trauma, or during an ongoing traumatic incident, are often warped. They are not recorded correctly, for lack of a better term. It's if you were using a video recorder of some kind, if you put it that way, it would be as if it was damaged while it was making that recording, and thus the recording itself would be forever damaged and inaccurate. But
Uh-huh.
it does not mean that the victim is lying, and in some cases doesn't mean the witness was lying. Uh, yes, I've personally seen that. I mean, personally seen where victims gave accounts of incidents, horribly traumatic sexual incidents, sex crimes, in which they did give accounts that were factually incorrect or inaccurate, but it was later determined that victim was in fact telling the truth about exactly what happened. Um, and yes, that does occur. That's one of the things that a well-trained sexual assault investigator has to guard against, is assuming
Uh-huh.
that the victim is lying whenever they give information that on the surface seems to be or is in fact incorrect.
That's key phrase there, well trained, and you can add to that experienced.
Yes.
As far as what investigators work in your case, whether they're investigating you on a self-defense
Hmm.
issue or they're investigating the incident in which you are the victim of the crime.
Correct.
Uh, because I gotta tell you, folks, I got made a detective because we had an opening in the detective bureau, and I wrote a letter, as
Okay.
all the other candidates in the agency were told to do. If you want to be a detective,
Mhm.
write a letter explaining why you want to be a detective. And I wrote the letter, and they said, "Congratulations, Weems, you're a detective." And I was working cases as an investigator, like right off the bat from that. And
Was there any kind of was there any kind of like introductory, detective, training for the new detective, you know?
they showed me where
Yep.
the different paperwork was and some of that other stuff.
Oh
And
goodness.
some of the other stuff. And instead of wearing the pretty blue uniform to work,
Yeah.
I started wearing a shirt and tie.
Okay.
And I was a detective.
Well, see, that's man, and I'm sure, I have no doubt that you did a good job because you're obviously an intelligent and inquisitive person. But to your point, there are agencies out there where people are chosen for something other
Hmm.
than professional knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Hmm.
You can, I mean, and the listeners can insert whatever other qualifications or attributes that a person might have been chosen for.
Yeah.
Um, and that is, and again, when you are the victim, or if you are the accused, that if people actually knew that, it would be horrifying to them to find out that this guy got this job because his dad
Hmm.
knew this guy, knew the chief, or whatever. It's, believe it or not, even in 2023, there are still political appointees being made into investigators and detectives.
Yeah. And again, this is not, we're not talking about people that are intentionally incompetent here
No,
too. They
no,
just, and then it
no,
could be people that are competent but inexperienced.
correct.
And
And
I worked a fair number of sexual assault reports prior to going to the force science class.
mhm,
And I remember just sitting there as that information was being presented and like, holy smokes.
right,
Now,
right,
thankfully, I don't have a case that I worked where that came into play.
right.
But
That's
I
good.
sat there thinking about how easily that
Yes.
could have been the issue.
Well, I'll say this: sexual assault cases uh, they are exceptionally difficult, because,
Hmm.
and I want to be very, very careful what I say here and how I say it, because it's an extremely sensitive topic, and rightfully so. But allegations of sexual assault are um, are many times dismissed or not taken seriously for a wide variety of reasons. Also, allegations of sexual assault are quite often made that are false, and they are
Oh, yeah.
intentionally false. And again, I have personally seen very, very compelling victims, or so-called victims, reporters, uh, people who make extremely convincing claims of having been sexually assaulted. And then there be some evidence to indicate that there was contact between these two individuals, that we can put them at the same place at the same time. And
Hmm.
then later, the evidence, the hard evidence, i.e. video evidence and or other witnesses or biological evidence or what have you, the evidence proves that the reporter made a false report, and an intentionally false report. And sometimes they forget that, things like phone dumps and
Hmm.
Facebook messages, and Snapchat, and many other types of communications where they have told a friend of theirs that they intentionally made a false report of
Yep.
sexual assault. So I've seen quite a few exonerations in that field too. So it is simultaneously one of the most under reported and under investigated offenses, and one of the most over reported offenses as well. And it
Yep.
is a very, again, I was not a sexual assault investigator, but I was around it a lot. I supervised them, or had to deal with a lot of those cases. And I also had to deal with some of political, the political difficulties of that. Because, for example, if a person, if an individual makes a certain claim and eventually that detective is able to prove that it's a false claim, but that individual then takes to social media and tags a whole bunch of different activist groups. It doesn't take very long
Yep.
for certain activist groups, I won't say any of their names here, but some frank, sometimes relatively well respected activist groups, to
Hmm.
be kicking the chief's door down, demanding to know why sexual assault victims are not being taken seriously in your city. Um, and that can be extremely difficult to deal with, because you've basically got a mob of activists who believe with their whole heart that there's been a victim who's been underserved, or who's been mistreated, and it's difficult to explain to them or show them this person intentionally and willingly lied about this incident. It did not happen, and she was knowingly trying to send an innocent man to prison. Those are exceptionally difficult things to deal with, both at the line detective level, and then later in the police leadership level. It could, because there's no nice way to work through that without making somebody angry. It's a
Oh,
political football.
I've seen a number of such cases in which someone was falsely accused.
Mm-hmm.
We could prove that the allegation was intentionally made
Mm-hmm.
falsely,
Yes.
and the district attorney would not bring charges against the
Yes.
complainant slash reporting party, whatever term you want to use,
Correct.
because it would dissuade
That's it.
real victims from coming
That's
forward. So
it.
wait a minute, we just had a guy
Mm-hmm.
or girl, because I know of one instance in which it was a female that was accused.
Right.
So it's not, most commonly it's guys, but all right. We're accused of a crime that in our state still carries the death penalty.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's not going to get imposed on
No.
a date rape type situation, but it's it's still a capital crime in our state.
Yeah.
All right, they've been accused of this heinous, awful
Right.
crime, and you're not going to stand up for them
No. No.
and prosecute them.
That is
Prosecute,
Lee,
yeah,
that is a common policy amongst law enforcement
mhm,
agencies, as well as many different district attorneys or prosecutors
yeah,
offices. And that's exactly the
yeah,
word they use. I've heard it
yeah,
used myself, the
yep,
exact same word. I think it's in a
yeah,
manual somewhere,
yeah,
that that it would dissuade legitimate victims from reporting actual sexual assaults, and so therefore
yeah,
we're not going to do it.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. Um, it's, yeah, you're right. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know the law in all 50 states, but as far as I know, sexual assault or the offense of rape carries prison sentences of multiple decades in
yeah.
most states. It's about, and even if you don't go to prison, you are required to register as a sex offender for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
I mean, it ruins people's lives. I mean, people just almost as badly or equally as bad as someone who's been falsely accused of murder. You know,
Yeah.
but to your point, I know we started about,
Eh,
you talked about, for science and memories. Yes, the human memory is exceptionally imperfect, and our perceptions of things, while things are extremely traumatic or difficult, dangerous, are often warped and recorded that way permanently, and so
Yep.
there's not an accurate recollection of it.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had been with the family violence unit
Yes, sir.
there, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. Um, Family violence is one of those instances too or in some other states, people may call it domestic violence.
Right.
Um, it's on that same category of sexual assault, and that it's often overreported and underreported,
Yes, sir.
over investigated and under investigated.
Yes.
Allegations are made vindictively.
Often that occurs quite often.
Oh yeah, often retaliatory, especially when it comes to divorce cases and child
And
custody
child custody.
cases.
That's it. Yeah.
Uh,
I've seen, and I'm not exaggerating here. I worked in
mhm.
an agency that was pretty busy. Um, Investigators who were housed at the Collin County Children's Advocacy Center. working hand in hand with CPS, child protective services, licensed therapists, other investigators, it's as well as forensic interviewers. So it was a big operation, and so I'm not exaggerating when I say, I mean, that unit that I was in handled thousands of cases per year involving some kind of act of family violence or crimes within the family. And Lee, you are 100% correct. Human beings can be incredibly underhanded and vindictive and vicious, and they express that viciousness not always through violence, but many times through using their local government apparatus, their local law enforcement apparatus to try to get what they want. And you are spot on. When there are children involved and questions about child custody, I have seen the most horrific and ugly accusations put in writing, put into police reports, going back and forth between members of the same couple, of the same family. The female is accusing the male of domestic, family violence, assault, sometimes sexual assault of not just her, but sometimes the children. And then I've seen males accusing the same guy accusing the female also of family violence and all kinds of other things. And it's very difficult to know who to believe. And then in some of those cases, you find out everybody's lying. They're all lying. And unfortunately, it's the kids who are caught in the middle. But yes, the family violence stuff, the vindictiveness there, and you're right. Many people do not understand the stakes they are playing for when they have been accused of family violence, especially, and this is the part I want listeners to really understand. They always start high and then work down low, right? So, they come in, you get sticker shock. Hey, you've been accused of felony assault here against your spouse or your girlfriend, your live-in girlfriend. And in most states, the person you live with, you cohabitate with for a certain period of time in a certain fashion, most of those states, those people qualify as members of a family, members of a household. So you've been charged now with a felony. And of course, that's when the panic sets in, not to mention all the financial panic and all that, the anxiety, but the panic that, you may be facing a felony charge. And then the DA comes in and says, hey, we will reduce that to a misdemeanor.
Have I got a deal for you?
Got a deal for you. Doug, you're not a bad guy. You just made you made a bad decision under a high pressure situation, and we don't want to send you to prison. So what we'll do is, we'll give you this misdemeanor if you promise to attend, Batterers Intervention Program, BIP. That's an actual program in Texas. So, you got to go to 6 weeks of classes about not, how to control your anger and not hit women. And even some innocent guys will take that. But what they don't realize is when you accept that, yeah, you avoided going to prison, but you are now convicted of family violence or domestic violence, which means that you can never own or carry a firearm again. Check out what the federal law says on that. I mean, the last time I filled out a 4473, I believe that was on there,
Yep. And that local prosecutor may not mention that.
Oh, no, they're not going to worry. That's not even on their radar. They don't care.
Right.
And if they do know about it, they're not worried about you and your future. They're getting a case resolved quickly. It looks great on their stats. It goes down as a successful prosecution. And it also, many times, whenever there's some kind of intervention program or required classes for you to go to, quite frankly, that's one hand washing the other. I don't want to be too cynical about it. Many of those programs are grant funded. And the more people they get into those programs, then that means by those metrics alone, then that means the program is certainly successful. And there oftentimes there is a lot of pressure from those kind of grant funded programs on prosecutors' offices and on other local government agencies to, hey, we need you to send people to us. So you've served, you've just served multiple purposes for the DA's office and for some other people. and you've also just unwittingly cheated yourself out of the right to own and carry a firearm ever again.
Uh, and for the audience, we want to be very clear that we are not making light of sexual assault or
No,
domestic slash family violence because both of us have seen the worst cases of it.
absolutely.
And the people that are legitimately guilty of those instances need to be severely punished.
Yes, sir.
Uh, but what we are talking about here is we want to make sure that people clearly understand that you've been accused of this awful thing. Now, if you did it, you ought to get the punishment you deserve.
That's correct.
But if you didn't, and we bring this up because the people that are listening or watching this show are going to be of the firearms carrying persuasion, or else why would you be paying attention to this show? Avoid that car salesman that has this great deal for you because it sounds good. You're
Yes.
if we go to trial and you get convicted, you're going to prison for 1 to 5 or
Yep.
whatever
Right.
that may be. But I will let you go, and all you have to do is go to this class or whatever. Well, oh yeah, sure, sign me up.
That's it.
Now, the flip side of that is even if you're innocent and you go to trial, you may get convicted. So it's a balancing act
Yes.
of what you got to make. We just both want you to understand what the stakes are
The
out there.
stakes are exceptionally high. And I'll say this. Um, I have I have a son and a daughter, both of
Mm-hmm.
whom are young adults. They're college age. And my wife and I have advised them repeatedly. I mean, talk to them about it is extremely important that you are very selective and careful about who you actually engage in relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that a person is unstable, you know that a person is prone to flights of fancy, a person is prone to fits of, uh, you know, uh, I want to be careful. I don't want to get in trouble, so I don't want to use the word hysteria. But people that are prone to playing fast and loose with the truth when they also become exceptionally emotional. Um, the fact that they're perfectly normal, 90% of the time, but 10% of the time they have a dangerous temper or they are extremely vindictive. If you choose to enter into a relationship with a person like that, if you choose to begin cohabitating with a person who has those kinds of tendencies, uh, it's not an exaggeration to say that you could very well be putting your personal freedom, your future personal freedom, at extreme risk. Because if that's how they act with you before you move in with them, imagine how they're going to act with you once they become much more comfortable. 6 months in, that's how you end up cohabitating with people that you just thought they were a little
Uh,
quirky, and now you found out they're on the edge of being mentally ill,
uh,
and dangerous. So it's be cautious.
and my state defines as one of the relationships under that's covered under family violence law is people who live or formerly lived with each other.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
the roommate that you got in your dorm room in college that the university or college randomly assigned to you, you are
Yes.
now for the rest of your lives in my state considered to be covered under the Family Violence Act.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you two get an argument over
Yeah.
you went in my drawer and got my t-shirt without asking, and now we're going to be in a shoving match.
Yeah.
Well, now that simple battery over that T-shirt has now turned into a mandatory arrest situation under the family violence law.
That's correct. And that's, I'm glad you said that, Lee. The
Mhm.
mandatory arrest.
Well,
Um,
supposedly mandatory.
right, supposedly mandatory. There are many states that have shall
Mhm.
arrest, that language, the word shall, and this is also important for anyone listening. Words mean things, and they are
Mhm.
exceptionally important. Those words are not just put there in the law for no reason. Every single syllable of every word
Mhm.
in your state's law matters. If the word shall is in there, that's pretty serious. If it says may, well, that's a little different, but it still puts things up to the discretion of
Uh-huh.
that decision maker. In many states, Texas is one of them. If there has been, if there is evidence that an actual family violence assault has occurred, then the peace officer shall arrest that person. There's no getting around it. And so when people get mad at the cops, because they make these arrests, that's because they are in some states they are absolutely mandated by law. And then of course, I mentioned if there's evidence that it has occurred or there's probable cause to believe that it has occurred. Well, probable cause can be a slippery concept sometimes. Again, it comes back to what does that individual investigator or detective or police officer believe? I've seen some pretty shoddy probable cause affidavits where once you actually read it, you realize they're just going on the word of a single person and not actually any tangible evidence. So it's dangerous territory. These are dangerous waters, and people. I strongly recommend anybody in the American firearms culture community to exercise extreme caution about who they associate with, who they move in with, who they have arguments with. And if you do find yourself in all of a sudden an exceptionally heated argument, which can absolutely occur with perfectly normal people who love each other, but I would again, anytime there's a firearm present, or anytime there's you are a firearms person, you're a firearms guy, you're a firearms gal, it magnifies many of those downstream effects in the eyes of the prosecutor and or a jury. Even if you don't get a firearm out, if there's no gun involved, but there was a gun present, it was in the home, there was a firearm present when this argument took place, and you said some things that were very troubling, Doug. And next thing you know, you have a very serious legal problem on your hands.
Oh yeah. And it also goes right back to the human factor too there when you start getting into interpretations.
Yes.
I have seen magistrate judges in the same court system have different interpretations of what constitutes cohabitation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
One judge used to say, if you've ever hung your pants on the headboard overnight, you have cohabitated with that person.
Wow.
I have
Okay.
seen another interpretation in the same court,
Uh-huh.
different judge, but the same court system that adopted the opinion of if they were boyfriend and girlfriend but weren't living together, was how we were going to apply whether or not family violence applied. If they spent the night prior to the incident together, then we're going to consider it family violence.
Right.
But if they did not spend the night prior to the incident together,
Wow.
then we're not.
Yeah. That's
It's it's luck of the draw as to which interpretation you may get applied.
that's exactly right. Again, I just to give another example of this, even seasoned lawyers, I mean, very seasoned attorneys, former prosecutors who have since become defense attorneys, they know that the last place they want to get a case involving a self-defense claim is in, Judge A's court, because everybody knows that Judge A is, he's anti-gun, he doesn't believe in the right of self-defense, etc. And everybody knows, okay, do everything in your power to get your case into Judge B's court, because that guy came from Montana originally. He's a gun owner. He likes to hunt. He's and I'm changed the names of the states here, but this is a real world example I'm talking about. This is not a hypothetical. And then these attorneys are sitting there telling me, well, so we know what the voting record is in this county, and so therefore we know that if we were to pick a jury, we would expect approximately 2/3 of that jury to have a certain political bent, which would not be in our favor. Therefore, we are going to request a bench trial with Judge B, who happens to be a pro self-defense, pro gun guy.
Yep.
So even when attorneys are having to make those kinds of judgments and trying to decide which referee do I want in this ring with my fighters, that just goes to show you the subjective nature of the entire criminal justice system.
Now, Doug, I know that you never, ever, ever, ever once factored in which judges had which particular events as to which judge you went and you applied for a search warrant or a subpoena with. Therefore, they would not be the trial judge in a particular case. I know you've never done that,
Never
Doug.
do that. And I've never participated in any conversations with detectives, investigators about which judge should we go to get this warrant ever. You know, that would never happen because the
No,
law is blind, Lee. It's
that's right.
blind. And everybody gets treated exactly the same, and everybody uses the same definitions and values at all times.
That's right. It's just black words on white paper.
That's
How
all it
how
is.
fair? How much more fair can you get?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you're whining about here. The law is the law. You know,
Yep.
it it's just those spaces in there, man. It's just like this. It's like the gaps between boards, on your
Hmm.
deck or in the, you can put all the spackle in there you want to, man, but there's always going to be some other gap that somebody's going to try to exploit. Um,
I'm glad to see that that's a universal thing.
oh yeah, it's everywhere, man, everywhere. That's the way it is. And you know what?
Yeah.
Everybody is doing it. Prosecutors do the same thing. They're trying to figure out
Hmm.
which court do we want to prosecute this case in. I know this for a fact. I mean, they're talking about, we really want to get it under Judge so and so because she's going to be retiring at the end of this session, and she's not running for
Hmm.
office again. So we know she's not going to worry about the political fallout of a decision on this
Hmm.
thing. I've been in the room when those prosecutors were having those kind of conversations.
Yep.
So yeah, it's the best way. This is one of those situations where there's no, as I've said many times, there's no
Yeah.
winning. There's no winning. The best thing that any of us can do is make danged sure that we don't do anything that could end us up in a situation where we are anywhere near a courtroom in the first place. Because once you're on the way there, you have a problem. And once
Hmm.
you're in that courtroom, like you said, the overwhelming weight of the evidence can be in your favor and you can still be convicted. You just don't know. It's kind of a magic 8 ball thing. You really are rolling the dice sometimes. And of course, yeah, okay, you can always appeal it. Yeah. And while you
Hmm.
sit in prison for the next 4 to 5 years while they appeal it. And
Yep.
then and those appeals don't always go well either.
Yep. For those of us who were around in the 1980s and I guess a couple of decades before that, that remember when every day we were just convinced that the nuclear weapons were going to fall from the sky.
Mm-hmm.
What was the old saying? The only way to win is not to play.
That's it. Yeah. That's from that old
Wasn't that a
movie.
line in a movie?
Yeah, War Games, an
War
old movie.
games?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
something about strange game. The only way to win is not to play. I hadn't thought of that, but
Yeah.
that's true. That's it.
And that's what it comes down to in this whole criminal justice system. The
Right.
only way to win in this game is to not play.
Correct. The way I describe this game is I ask people to think about, pick whatever field-based sport you want. Okay, football,
Hmm.
baseball, soccer, whatever it is, and you are standing on the edge of the field.
Hmm.
And but once you make the decision to step onto the field, and here's the part that I really want people to understand: you don't get to step off the field again
Right.
until that game is completely finished. And you have no control over who the umpires are out there or who the referees are. And you don't, and everybody else that's on that field playing against you, they have input and influence and a vote on your future. So the worst thing you can do is step into the arena in the first place. And that's one of the things. I'm still working on this presentation. I've been working on it for a while, but that goes from, and I'm trying to explain this. I'm not doing a very good job, Lee, but I'm trying to explain this from the very genesis of an event. From the very moment that you make a decision to say something to that guy that needs to be told, right? That guy who's out of line in the grocery store, or he's somebody who's acting up in the bank, um, and you make the decision to say, "Hey, buddy, you have just stepped into the arena, whether you realize it or not. You just have, and now he's going to get some measure of control over your future. Now, hopefully, it'll just be a few words, and then it'll be over, and you get to go back to your life. But what if it's not? What
Yeah.
if you find yourself now in the midst of a deadly force situation, or even just a standard good old fist fight, right? But
Mhm.
of course, that's all caught on video, and now you just had a fight in a public place. How's that going to go for you? Well, the game doesn't stop there. Don't think that you get to walk off the field. Nuh-uh. you're staying on that field because now the game is going to move through and they're going to bring in other players. They're going to bring in investigators to look at you. They're going to bring in DAs to come and look at you and decide what's going to happen. So you stay on the field. There is no rest for you. They get to switch out players against you. They bring in fresh players against you. You're not going home. Well, if you're lucky, you get to go home. I mean, in the real world, but
Mhm.
you're not really leaving that game. You're still on that field, and you don't get to control the outcome of that game. You can do the very best you can, play as hard as you can, but just remember they are professional players and you're not. And it's
Yep.
ugly.
Yeah. The fact that you would not kill someone over an argument over a parking space does not mean that the person that's on the other side of the argument shares that same feeling.
That is exactly right. And what one of the things that I also have cautioned people against is you have to understand that other people's cultures really do matter.
Hmm.
And whether you agree with them or not, and whether their cultural values are right or not, or whether they're legal or not, is irrelevant. And I'm here to tell you, there are some cultures in which if you insult somebody in front of their wife, you insult a man in front of his children, he is culturally bound to respond with violence. He has no choice. And that is how, and I'm about to say something a little shocking here. That is how a person who thinks that they were just having an ugly conversation or ugly back and forth and maybe a brief shoving match, that's how they end up being stabbed to death by a man who is literally crying and shrieking as he's stabbing the other guy because he doesn't actually want to stab you, but honor demands it. He
Yeah.
has to. And that kind of stuff really does happen. These are not esoteric
Hmm.
hypotheticals. You don't know you don't realize that you may have just inadvertently backed someone into a corner. The fact that you can't see the corner doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's another reason that I recommend everybody really do their best to try to actually practice, you know, old-fashioned manners, because old-fashioned manners came from a very, very violent time. And they were designed to ensure that people were able to express intent to one another and to prevent each other from being stabbed, and also to prevent another third party that we don't know from being put into a position where he has to stab
Hmm.
you. And I know that sounds a little crazy in this day and age, but every now and then, and I'm just being really blunt here, every now and then, uh, decent, normal, regular, suburban Americans with no exposure to criminal subcultures and no exposure to cultures from other countries
Yeah.
run into a situation like that, and then they find themselves fighting for their life. You know.
I've seen more than one rich white boy from Mableton, Georgia, which is a high-end subdivision in Metro Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
whose definition of a fight was we push and shove and say mean things to each other.
Uh-huh.
Get educated as to what some boy from a housing project's definition of a fight was.
Right. That's it.
And they ain't the same definition.
Not the same thing. And
No.
so yeah, that's the deal. Is like you said, man,
Uh,
you just because you won't kill somebody over a parking space argument, to him, it's not about the parking space. It's about the fact that you have insulted and disrespected him in front of his new wife,
right.
and he can't
Yep.
allow that to happen. You know,
Uh,
you don't know what other people value, and you also don't know what other people are truly afraid of.
yep.
Um, and so that's I really do, Lee. I really do try to, in my day-to-day interactions with strangers, I really do truly just use kind of old-fashioned Texas or old-fashioned Southern manners. I say yes
Hmm.
sir and no sir. I say excuse me. I say please and thank you.
Hmm.
Um, my one of the things that I really do focus on very much when I'm dealing with any, especially if I have to go into a sketchy place for some reason, which I typically don't, and I try to avoid them. But if I find myself in a sketchy place or with sketchy people, I try to take anxiety off the table. I try to make sure that I'm very polite about what my intent is or what I'm doing there, and then excuse myself and leave as soon as I can. But I want to make sure that people know I'm not looking for trouble. and I'm not here to cause any trouble. And I try to be very respectful when I'm in other people's houses, both figuratively and literally. I think if more people would do that, there'd probably be a lot less of those sudden violent interactions over parking spaces or,
Yep.
standing in line or what have you.
Yeah. And as I tell cops when I'm training them, and
Mhm.
I'll tell this to the private citizens folks, there are plenty of people that are willing to spend a night in jail.
Absolutely.
And that's
Yeah.
just the cost of doing business. That's like paying the electric bill.
Yeah. That's no
It's
big
just
deal. That
overhead.
that doesn't mean anything. That there's guys, I'm telling you, there are guys it doesn't mean anything to them. Spend a night or even two in jail or three,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, whatever. You know.
Because that is a lesser cost than taking lip from somebody
That's right.
in their world.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, that's man, I'll tell you some of the stuff I learned as a police officer. I've been able to, I mean, I learned it through trial and error. I learned it through being
Hmm.
taught by very wise police officers. I also learned it through vicarious learning, watching other guys mess up
Yep.
and realizing, oh, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember telling, I tell them when I was a sergeant, telling some of my younger officers, I was like, listen, and listen to me very carefully. I said, you go into these housing, go over into these, into some of these apartments and some of these houses in a particular area. I said, you are not ever going to win an argument with the black lady who runs that house. It's not going to
Mm.
happen. It's not going to happen. And if you go in there acting like you own the place or you're running things, it's not going to work out well for you. I said, you need to go in there. If you're looking for help or information, you need to go in there being polite and talking to her the same way that you would talk to your grandmother. And I said, you'll get a lot further with that. I said, but you're not going to win that argument. And you're not going to talk her down. And you're not going to talk over her. It's not going to work. And I was mostly saying that again for some of some of the suburban, white boys that had never been exposed to anything like that in their lives. And some of the African American dudes that were on my crew were smiling. They were laughing. They were laughing. They were like that. Yeah, they were like that. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, I will admit, man, Lee, I had a couple of guys. One in particular. I mean, he didn't care about other people's cultures, where they were from, what they valued. It
Hmm.
was it was I'm the police. I'm in charge. I'm in charge now. This is my house now. No, dude. No, that is not the way to do it. That's not the way to handle things.
There was a housing project in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And for those not familiar, Murfreesboro is a town about 30 minutes east of Nashville. That's one of the larger cities in Tennessee.
Mhm.
And this particular housing project is closed down now, and it's used for police and fire training. And I was attending a class there, and one of the local cops took me over and showed me one of the units in this housing complex. He says, "You see that unit right there?" And like, yeah, he says, "Sarge lived there." And there was a elderly black woman that lived in that unit. And
Mhm.
the officers from the PD and the other residents of that community all called her Sarge,
Oh wow.
short for sergeant.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep.
And if you needed something in that, like you rolled to a call or
Yeah.
whatever, and you needed
Yes.
something in that housing, you better go see Sarge
Yeah. Yeah.
before, obviously if it's shots fired, something you're rolling doing your
Sure.
stuff. But if it was
Yeah.
like you're going to respond to something needing an investigation or something like
Hmm.
that, you better go see Sarge before you
Yeah.
started going knocking on doors. Because Sarge would go with you and help you,
Hmm.
or she might not.
She might not. Yeah. And you'd rather have her help. Yeah. I mean, get her to sign off on this beforehand. That's actually the most important supervisor you can
Yeah.
talk to.
Because if
Yeah.
she showed up at your door telling you to cooperate with those with the boys
Hmm.
in blue, folks
Right.
cooperated with the boys in blue.
Right.
But until Sarge showed up and told them to do that,
No.
mm-mm.
That's probably one of those kind of lessons. But I think probably some of the most important for young police officers is to find out who is the influential person here.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that's the way that the human
Hmm.
race has worked forever, and it's the way things work now in many places. It
Yeah.
still does. And there's plenty of influential people in various neighborhoods who they may not be persons of means. They're not wealthy, but they have
Hmm.
incredible power. Um, over what happens there, and they can definitely influence things for or against you.
Man, it's funny how the cultures of these things uh, just go. I'm a country boy
Hmm.
that grew up 7 miles out of a town of 4,000 people.
Yeah.
You still can't get cable TV or a pizza delivered where I grew up, and there ain't no city water and septic
Uh-huh.
system. All right,
Right.
it's city water and sewage. You got a well and a septic tank,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of place.
Uh-huh.
And then I went off to the big city to get educated, and then even bigger city when I started working. And it was funny things. I was looking for a stolen bike of all things.
Uh-huh.
And I went to a housing project to look for the stolen bike. And I'm seeing, things like that. I start talking to residents, like, whose bike is that? And they like, oh, that belongs to so and so. That belongs to so and so. And I get to one is like, whose is that? And they said, that's the neighborhood bike.
Uh-huh.
What
Yeah.
on earth is a neighborhood bike?
Just want, you just use it, and then when you're done, you just drop it off.
Yep. That's what it
Yeah.
was. It was there. It was fair game for anybody to use.
Yeah.
And when you got done, you brought it back and left it in a common place that anybody else in that
Yeah.
project could get it and use it.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
community owned.
Yeah.
It
Now,
was
hey,
truly.
that stuff happened. I grew up in a very originally. I mean, I'm originally. If your listeners want to look it up, I'm originally from Sanderson, Texas, which is the town where the movie No Country for Old Men takes place in.
All right.
So it's extremely rural. It's there's about 800 people in the entire county.
All right.
So I grew up on a family ranch there. Uh, yeah, we had well, and yeah, it sat at a septic tank. There's no hookup there, but my grandfather was telling me when he was a kid there was donkeys and mules there
Mm-hmm.
that just they were like the neighborhood donkey. You could just use it, ride it for a little bit, but it didn't belong to anybody.
Yeah.
It's like, no, a donkey belonged to himself. It just whatever. You just ride him for a little bit, play with it, whatever. It didn't belong to anybody. Kids would
Yeah.
ride them and stuff. And sometimes they somebody come and use it for a couple of days on some job, but it didn't really belong to anybody.
Yeah. Oh, this will probably get me canceled. I grew up in the county in which all the Brer Rabbit stories were written.
Oh goodness, did you really?
Oh yeah.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So
All the Uncle, I guess all the Uncle Remus stories
yeah,
would be the
Uncle
best way to
Remus.
say
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Uncle
right.
Remus
Uncle
stories.
Remus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang,
Uh,
that's really
that
something.
uh, that and the author of The Color Purple is
Oh,
from
really?
that same
Okay.
town. And we have one other claim to fame.
Yeah.
The founder of Chick-fil-A is from our little town as well, little
Is
county
that
as well.
right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's it. Well, I'll tell you what, he's done pretty
It's
well for himself.
oh yeah, it's a very cosmopolitan place. We'll tell you Uncle Remus stories, and except for there's no Chick-fil-A there. So
Right.
that's the
Oh, really? Yeah.
there's not one there. He
That's too
he's
bad.
from there, but he did he went off to Atlanta.
Oh, right.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we've got to talk about mental health
Okay.
so you can tell the dancing clown story.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And folks, this is a very polite term. I don't mean any ill will by this term whatsoever. I had no idea until I started doing the cop thing that there was as much functional crazy in the world as there is. But what I mean by that is people that can get up and go to work, they can come home and pay their bills, but they are living on a fringe of sanity and insanity,
Yes.
and can easily bounce back and forth between the two. And man, it's scary, and there's no resources out there for these folks either. It's bad, and especially when you start getting into the lower socioeconomic standpoints, or even I know some people from some extremely well-to-do families
Yeah.
that the family has done everything they can do,
Yes.
but the person's out there walking on the other side, and they just can't. They try to help, but they can't. Or eventually, they're like, "Well, we've done everything we can."
Yeah. And I will say this, for people who've never had to deal with any of this stuff up close and personal, it's so easy to just dismiss uh, people who are mentally ill as just, well, they're just crazy. There's something
Yeah.
wrong with them, right? It's really easy to think about them that way. Um, but I would ask, anybody who's never experienced any of that up close, just imagine somebody you love, truly,
Mhm.
your son, your daughter, your wife, your brother, um, all of a sudden slowly starts to say things that are a little bit off, a little bit weird. And then it gets progressively worse over the next several months to where you realize that they genuinely believe that they're talking to people who aren't there. They become more and more disturbed and worried and scared and paranoid that there's somebody out to get them. You try to you take them for to a doctor, you take them to a mental health professional, and it ends up ultimately not being fixed. Again, kind of I mentioned like the antibiotic thing. I mean, sometimes medications don't work, or the person won't take them, and the situation gets worse and worse and worse. And now 3-4 years later, your son is literally on the street, homeless, and won't come home, and you can't get him home, and he's actually
Mm-hmm.
dangerous because in his heart of hearts genuinely believes that the government's trying to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask anybody to ask themselves, if you honestly, and I really want listeners to ask themselves this question, if you truly believe that God was telling you to do something, that you were hearing the voice of God, and that God was ordering you to do something, you really believed it, would you do it? Well, the answer to that is, of course you would, because you truly believe it's the voice of God. You genuinely believe that. Well, what if God is telling you to do ugly things and horrible things, or what if God is telling you that you need to get on your bicycle and ride to Cleveland, Ohio? I mean, but that happens to completely innocent people. It's a tragic thing that happens to families, wealthy families, poor families, and everybody in between. And, it's all theory until it happens to your son or happens to your daughter, or until you're the police officer that's standing there looking at a guy that and this is a true story. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I watched a man over the course of several years, had been a perfectly normal guy. Schizophrenia starts often sets in the early 20s. This guy was a perfectly normal dude working at a high-end restaurant in a nice part of town, and he slowly slipped off into schizophrenia and eventually became one of those guys that is wandering the streets with all of his earthly possessions, talking to himself and talking to people who aren't there. And it was a true tragedy. And I watched it happen over the course of several years. And
Yeah.
that is not a unique situation at all. That has happened all over America. So mental illness is, it's easy to dismiss if it's not affecting you directly, or if it's just that person that's wandered into your backyard that you call the police, and you make them, you just go, get him out of here, go, shoot, get him out of here.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't solve the problem, and we have a serious mental health problem in this country that has not been taken seriously by our elected officials on both sides of the aisle. There's, we can send apparently billions and billions of dollars to other countries to help them with their problems. But for whatever reason, we just can't seem to work up the national will to spend a couple of $billion here to work on our mental health problem. And we really do need to do it.
Yeah. How much money are we spending on incarceration and the
Mm-hmm.
whole machine of the system that we could save if somebody with a clipboard and a pill dispenser in a little economy car was riding around each day and, Doug, I got to
Yeah,
watch you take your medicine
that's
today.
it. Yeah,
All right, check off, Doug, I'll see you tomorrow.
that's it.
And went out and got in their little Ford Focus or Kia Soul or whatever
Right, right.
and drove off. And the next shift, somebody came along and made sure they took their
Yeah,
evening dose or whatever. And like they did that all day instead of we've locked you up for the 17th time in a
right,
6 month period for criminal trespass,
right,
or we've locked you up for a heinous crime that you did when you truly didn't have the mens rea to commit
right,
the heinous crime. And now you're sitting in jail and we've got this whole thing started over again.
right. When
It,
people,
it's saddening.
it
It's
is. And when people say, well, that's not the function of government, we shouldn't be spending money on that. Well, let me assure you, we are. We're already spending the money on it, because once
yeah.
they go into a correctional facility, whether that's a jail or a prison or a state jail, um,
Mm-hmm.
now we have to deal with it. So now we're paying to feed them, house them, clothe them literally, and still get them the medication because they're required to by federal law. So you're actually paying more for it now
Mm-hmm.
than what we probably could be paying for it. And we would have somebody that was a productive citizen out there able to hold down a job and do something meaningful with their lives instead of sitting in a correctional facility.
Oh yeah, we're paying for it.
Yeah, right. You're paying for it, and I mean, I think we would actually save money if we had
Yeah.
more mental health professionals, employed at police departments and in different, local government entities doing exactly what you said, Lee, checking on all of the frequent flyers, making sure that people are taking their medication, uh, you know, help. I mean, and many times, I know this sounds all because I want to be clear. I'm not some big government, central planning guy. I'm quite the contrary. I mean, I'm basically everything that's the opposite of that.
Hmm.
But when you see the kind of damage that is done not just to those individuals but to the communities that they live in, when you start realizing you just put a cost benefit analysis on this thing, how can we prevent this problem in the first place, and where can we save some money on this, and where can we prevent future damage from occurring? Yeah, it actually makes good fiscal sense, from that fiscal conservatism type mindset. Makes good fiscal sense. Let's get in front of this problem and treat it and get the guy the kind of ongoing care that he needs. So in some places, it would even be suitable to get him a ride to their therapist. Hey, you're supposed to meet Dr. Jones, every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Harold, that. Yeah, let's go. Get in the
Hmm.
van. We're taking you over to see Dr. Jones. Um, that's the kind of stuff that we probably need to be doing. We need to be exploring that. I'm not claiming to know how to get it done. I'm just saying that we need to be doing that.
And when someone is truly in the midst of slipping off into this situation we're talking about, or they're having some other form of mental crisis, it's not all schizophrenia.
Right.
Yeah,
That's correct.
some other form of mental situation.
Mm-hmm.
Putting them in handcuffs and putting them in the back of a patrol car is only going to exacerbate that.
Yes. Yes.
But if I'm wearing blue or a shirt or a brown shirt, running around with the blue lights on my car, and this person's in a place of business or a public place or your backyard,
Right.
you want something done about it now. Well, when you call 911, they don't send their mental health provider.
Right.
They send one of us that, our handcuffs are about the only tool we've got in a situation like that,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm laughing out of, I don't have any other response.
Right.
And it's just, I'll sit there going, I know this is not the best way to handle this situation, but this is
Mm-hmm.
the only tool that I, as a peace officer, have to deal with this.
Right. I mean, I have to. I mean, if I transport somebody to get to get a mental health evaluation, as you and I both know, I mean, I got to handcuff them. I mean,
Hmm.
to do otherwise, I mean, again, it's that 1% that'll kill you.
Yeah,
That really hurts you. So, as we all know, you go into the police car, you're getting handcuffed and searched. That's just the way it is, the way it has to be.
yeah,
You transport somebody for that mental health evaluation. I mean, maybe they get the help they need, maybe they don't, and oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes it's a in and out kind of thing, and then that same peace officer will deal with that same person again next week,
yeah,
respond to multiple other calls. This is a common
yeah.
problem throughout America.
And people will not believe us as we're sitting here both saying this
Yeah.
until they see it for themselves. And I know that the sheriff and I, man, we used to talk about it at all the public events we would go to. And then when
Hmm.
we go in front of the county commission, which I think y'all call them judges in Texas, even though they're not judicial officers.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Uh, for the honest, think of it as a great big city council on the county level.
That's all it is.
Yeah. We would explain this, this whole how we end up, folks, the largest dispenser of mental health services in your county is your county jail. It's
Right.
not a medical practice.
That's correct.
I think the largest provider of mental health services in the United States at one time was the Cook County Jail, which is the county jail in Chicago, Illinois.
Right. I've heard that.
Um, and this was like a constant talking point for us when we were out in public. And I worked in a very big country club county is about the best way to describe it.
Uh-huh.
And we had a lady that was walking through our county. Just she was walking from Florida to somewhere else and came through Georgia, and eventually she got to our county. And it takes a while to walk across the place. And we had one day where we dealt with her on the south end of the county. The next
Hmm.
day we dealt with her on, it's about the central part of the county.
Right.
And it comes on, and finally, um, she ends up kind of in town, and one of our county commissioners gets involved
Hmm.
with trying to deal with this person. And she's actually seeing this all happen firsthand. And I rolled out on the scene, and she's like, "Can't you do something?" But she's not violated any criminal law.
Right. She's not a danger to herself or others.
Right. She's not going to hurt herself. She's not going to
Mhm.
hurt anybody else. She
Right.
has not violated any criminal law. The only
Right.
thing she's done wrong is she's functional. Well, she wasn't even really functional crazy because she was just
Right.
crazy. And I say that again, not as a derogatory term.
Right.
And I told the commissioner, I said, there's nothing that I can legally do. I can't force her to get in the car and take her, because if I do, I'm kidnapping her.
Correct. Yeah. That's a violation of her civil rights.
Right. And this county commissioner, good heart. And I just can't believe this is the way it is. And I said, well, now
Yeah.
do you believe me when I've told you this? She's
Yeah.
like, yes, I do. And she's like, I'm going to call the governor's office. I'm going to get something done.
Okay.
And sure enough, she got on her cell phone and started calling people in state government, because she's a county commissioner, which is,
That's a
that's a pretty
powerful,
big deal.
it's a
Pretty
powerful
big deal.
position. Yeah.
And she finally got on the phone with someone who said, well, we'll send a crisis intervention team. They'll be there in 2.5 hours.
Right. Okay. So we're supposed to stand here with this lady on the side of the road and what, not let her leave? Because what if she says, I'm ready to go. I'm
Right.
walking off,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. That's the whole thing. We're not supposed to detain people that haven't
Yeah.
done anything
Yeah.
illegal.
You can't do that.
Yeah. And I just told the commissioner, it's like, this is the way it is all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're seeing it for yourself.
Yeah. There were,
And
the county that I was working in, at the time, so the population of the county that I'm is now over 1 million. At the time that this meeting happened that I was involved in, I think it was still hovering around 800,000. There's probably could have been 750, but keep in mind this has
mhm,
been 5 years ago or more. It was actually more than that. But the chief actually asked me to come in and sit in the meeting, and these mental health providers, and there's a lot of bureaucracy in there, just like there is with insurance and HMOs and PPOs and all that when it comes to healthcare, regular healthcare. Well, the same kind of bureaucracy gets involved in the mental health care field as well, and it's very, it's just, what's the word, labyrinthine. It's
mhm,
difficult, right? So we had some of these different guys in there, and they were saying, hey, we really made progress, and so we now have, the county has authorized, 3 beds. So we've got 3 beds now, for people that need to be, committed, and we were just sitting there, and the chief looks at me, and he's like, looks over, he goes like, Doug, you want to take this? And I was like, we do mental health commitments. We do roughly, between 15 and 20 mental health commitments per day. I mean, we take people for that, I mean, it's,
mhm.
you know, uh, 3 beds isn't going to even scratch the surface of this county, which has, at least, 750,000 people living in it. That's not even a drop in the bucket. That's like a drop in the ocean. That's not, I mean,
Yeah.
appreciate the 3 beds, but that's not going to help solve the problem. And then to your point about the have a crisis intervention or crisis counselor come out, I remember the chief just straight up asked him, he's like, so you tell me then, he's listening to this thing, he's like, what are we supposed to do when we catch the naked man who's completely covered himself in honey, where we've wrestled this guy down? And he said,
Thankfully, it was honey.
yeah, thankfully it's honey, right? And he's like, what are we supposed to do with that? And he said, if we can't take him, and the guy says, we would have a crisis counselor call them on the phone. And I said, on the phone? So we've just had to wrestle this guy, and I mean, get him down. I mean, he's completely deranged. You want us to hold the phone up to him? So, hey,
Yeah.
somebody wants to talk to you. And things have improved quite a bit in that county since
Yeah.
then. I mean, quite a bit, but that's a real world example of how even well-meaning people within local governments
Yeah.
just, they do not understand the scope or the gravity of the mental health situation in this
Yeah.
country. They don't.
Yeah. I know of a situation in which a deputy shot an individual who was obviously in the midst of a mental health crisis.
Hmm.
The deputy had no choice but to use deadly force. And during all the review and everything of it, a certain individual within the system, and this is still an ongoing case, so I can't get into very specific details on it, kept mentioning, well, what if a crisis intervention person had been deployed, all that kind of stuff, and the answer was they weren't there. We were. And you look at from the time in which the deputies arrived on scene to the time in which the deputy was forced to use deadly force, there was no time for one of them to have gotten there,
Yeah.
unless that's who rolled on the 911 call.
Right. So it's a ridiculous hypothetical in a
Yeah.
situation like that.
Yeah. And I agree. I know the family of the person that was killed, everything, and it's heartbreaking, it's heart wrenching.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
know what this family has dealt with for the decades leading up to this incident. And I know what they're dealing with now. And I agree 100% if there had been functional mental health intervention along the way,
Hmm.
the deputy would not have had to do what the deputy had to do. She'd still be alive, but
Yeah,
this is the system we got.
it is. And I'd like to think that it's improving in some places, but then,
Uh,
every day we see examples of where it clearly
uh,
hasn't. So you wanted to hear the clown story, right?
yeah, I'm saying we've been going for quite some time, but we got to
Yeah.
get the clown stories recorded.
So, this is an incident that happened when I was a patrol officer. I was, and this occurred in a pretty nice neighborhood, relatively nice neighborhood, typical, sort of upper middle class suburban neighborhood, anywhere America kind of thing. And I use this story specifically as a teaching point, uh, to help people understand. And I'm going to use the word crazy. I'm with you on that, Lee. I'm not using it in a pejorative manner or derogatory manner, but I want the everyman, the every woman to understand that just because they perceive a person as being crazy does not mean that individual is not telling the truth, that they're not capable of rational thought, that they don't know what's going on. People can be mentally ill. They can have serious mental problems, and they can be absolutely correct about what they're telling you. And so I learned this is a true story, and it changed the way that I did work from then on, because I started realizing, no matter how weird something sounds on the front end, pay attention and check on it. Just check. Just go make sure that it's not true, because what if it is true? So we get the call from a homeowner. He wants to talk to a police officer about his neighbor. There's apparently been some kind of neighbor dispute, and it's the mentally ill man who called us. So I get over there to the house. It's a daytime call situation, and as soon as I make contact with the man, you can just tell by his general affect and his presentation that he's got some issues of some kind. He's extremely anxious. He's very upset. He's pretty animated. And he says he wants me to do something about his neighbor. He said that his neighbor is trying to steal his house. And I was like, keep in mind, I'm a young patrol officer at the time. So, I didn't have necessarily all the right skills and communication skills I developed later. But I'm just like, what do you mean he's trying to steal your house? And he's like, he wants my house. He wants to take my house from me. He's trying to steal a house from me, and he won't stop. And he just on and on and on. And I'm like, how is somebody going to steal your house from me? You need to go talk to him. You need to talk to him. Tell him to stop what he's doing. And then he tells me that his neighbor is a clown, and that his neighbor comes over and that he dances in the front yard, and that he's trying to drive him crazy, and he's trying to steal his house. And I was like, so your neighbor is a clown? He said, yeah, he's a clown. He wears a clown suit and he dances in my front yard, and he's trying to steal my house. That's what this is all about. So I went next door, knocked on the door, and the guy living there is a lawyer. And he opens the door. He's very nice. He's very polite, uh, perfectly measured presentation, affect. And he's just like, I feel so sorry for Bob. It is just such a tragedy what's happening over there. I wish I could do something about it. And yeah, he's got it in his head that I'm trying to steal his house or something. I don't know what that's about. I really hope that he gets the help he needs. With the eyebrows when they come, the faux, concern. I'm so worried about Bob, okay. Anyway, but at the same time, I admit my BS meter was going off just a little bit with this guy, and I didn't really something about him I didn't like. I can't articulate it, but you're just like, I don't know, man.
Well, he was
So
a lawyer.
right. He's a lawyer, so there's that, right? So I was gonna go back over there and tell the caller, okay, I've talked to your neighbor, etc. But then I was standing there, and the way the street was constructed, this occurred. They were next door neighbors, but the street went down and curved, and then there was this house on the corner, kind of on a somewhat elevated lot, and the garage door was open, and there was this older man in there, this big woodworking shop. I remember he had this, one of those big table saws, and I was looking up there, and I looked over here, and I looked up there, and I realized if something happened here, that old guy saw that, or he would have seen anything. So I thought, I'll just go up there and talk to him, And what I was expecting him to tell me was that it was all BS and that this was none of this has happened. So I get up there, and man, he's one of these guys that will barely even look at you because he's too busy. He didn't have time for you, And now, and I do, hey, my name is Officer Deaton, the Plano Police Department. He said, yeah. And he's like measuring and still cutting and stuff and rigging up things. And I said, the reason I'm here is, I explained, I got this call down here, blah, blah, blah. Your neighbor's over here. And I explained, this guy says that. He goes, yeah, that attorney SOB is trying to steal that guy's house. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. He goes, that's what he's doing. He's trying to get that guy's house. And I said, what do you mean? How's he doing? He said, look, he goes, that poor man over there, he said, he's been sent to the state hospital a couple of times. And they held him there for a while. He said, so then he couldn't pay his mortgage. So then his house would go into foreclosure, and he could barely, so he's managed to catch up on the payments again. But he said he's right on the edge of going into foreclosure again. Well, he said that attorney, and that's how the guy, he kept calling that attorney, and he'd say the whole word, that attorney SOB. He said, he's trying to move his sister down here. And he said, he's trying to move her into that house right next door. He says, so what he's doing is he's trying to steal that guy's house. And I said, well, what is he doing? And he's like, he's dancing in a damn clown suit out in the front yard. And I said, you saw that? He goes, hell yeah, I saw it. He goes, he's been out there, everybody knows he's doing it. And I said, you saw him do that just now? He goes, yeah, I saw it. So this old guy ends up telling me that lawyer was putting on a clown suit with a mask and going out there and dancing around in that guy's front yard, talking to him through the windows and stuff like that, trying to drive him crazy so that he would get committed again, get behind on his payments, and then he could get that house when it went into foreclosure. That was the whole thing. So got the guy's name and all that, went back over there to the house, the attorney's house, knocked on the door. And I said, hey, so I let him know, listen, I know what you're doing, and it's going to stop. Oh, really? What am I doing? It's with that kind of brazenness, I said, you're out here dancing around in a clown suit in your neighbor's front yard. And I said, and other people have seen it, and I have their names. And I said, so listen to me very carefully. I explained to him, I'm going to take a serious report on this. I'm going to document all of this in the report. Your name is going in the report. The names of witnesses are going in the report. I didn't tell him I only had one witness, And then
As my father used to always say, you don't have to say everything.
That's right. You don't. So I let him think there was more than one witness. And I told him it was going to be put in the permanent call notes so that anytime there was a response at that man's house, at the man with the mental health problem, that it was going to pop up in those call notes. So any police officer who showed up would see that immediately. And he started to get about halfway smart with me again. And I said, I tell you what, I said, if that's how you want to do it, I said, I'll send a copy of this report down to the Texas Bar Association and let them read it too. And I said, and I'll fill out the complaint too, just have them look at your law license. And I said, I bet they'd probably be interested in that. And man, that's when he just got quiet. And so I said, so, do you understand? He's like, yep, I understand. And that was the end of that. And so I went over, told the guy, told the caller that I talked to him, it wasn't going to happen again, et cetera, but to let us know if it did. Anyway, that truly was, it completely changed my perspective from then on. I'm glad that happened to me. I was still in my 20s when that happened. And um, well, did it happen to me? I'm glad that I encountered that, and I'm glad that I learned that lesson, because it ended up helping me later on. There were many other incidents that occurred later in my career where it's so easy to blow somebody off. You think, oh, that's just some crazy homeless guy over there. Well, hold on a minute. Maybe he actually saw something. And then you find out, sure enough, he did, and they can articulate it, and they're right, and you can follow up on it. But if you if you don't take this stuff seriously, if you don't go and check on it, you just never know what you could be missing.
Uh, Doug, do I have your permission to cut this little clip out and use it when I'm teaching?
Absolutely. I hope you will.
Thank you. Thank you. My employer is very big on copyright and the
Oh, okay.
like. And so I want to
Yeah.
make sure I've got permission
No, I
to
think
use it.
that's good. I mean, I'm honored that you would want to use it. It's just, I mean, it's something, again, it taught me a great deal. I've shared it
Mhm.
with many other, younger officers when once I became, the older supervisor, but it's like, it's just it's so tempting to just write people off and assume they have no meaningful information to offer. And that's a classic case. That's a classic call right there that proves that's not true. And every now and then, when disturbed people make grandiose claims, they are telling the truth, and that stuff is real.
And even when it's not real to us, it is real to them.
100%, it is real to them. That's what I meant when I gave the example about
Mhm.
if any of us genuinely believed that God, the voice of God, was speaking to us, we would take that pretty seriously, wouldn't we?
Yep.
That'd be very real to us, So it's I mean, it's a true tragedy when people do experience something like that. I mean, it is real to them, unfortunately, and no amount of us telling them it's not real, you can just settle down and just go about your business. That's not going to work. It's not going to solve the problem.
All right. We've been going for quite some time now, and I know
Yes,
we
sir.
had a couple other topics we were going to delve into, but how about let's do a part two some other
Yeah,
point
I'd
in
love
time?
that. Thank you so much.
One episode that I'm wanting to do is get a couple of us old head cop trainers together
Mhm.
because I got some questions I want to ask about turning rookies loose on the wild, and I figure it'd be great to be part of that panel.
Oh
So I'm
man,
going to go ahead and invite you back for that.
thank you so much. I'd love to be a part of that.
And I very much appreciate you joining today and sharing your expertise and the great stories.
Thank you so
Uh,
much. I really
and
appreciate
thank
you.
you. And anything you've got coming up you'd like to tell the audience about?
I've got a little article coming out in American Cop magazine that's supposed to publish, I think, the Wednesday right before Christmas, and it's a little bit about mental health. It is
Okay.
for first responders, and the kind of the general message on that is, hey, for both police and fire, you're not responsible for all the ugliness in the world, and you can't solve all of it. You do the very best that you can, and that's good enough as long as you've given your best. So I hope the article will be well received. It's it's um, I've been told that it's pretty good, so I guess we'll see.
All right, and that's an American Cop magazine.
Yes, sir.
And folks, the editor for that is frequent show guest Eric Gelhaus. So quality publication.
Absolutely, it is.
All right. Doug, again, thank you for coming on the show today. And at some point in time, we'll have to get you to tell a story about your being the big Western movie star.
I don't know about big Western movies. It's about if I'm lucky, I'll be in this movie for 20 seconds. It's probably most like 10. So
Uh,
yeah, there's a little trash talking. I get shot. I fall off my horse, and the rest of the movie goes on. So
if the director doesn't cut it out and throw it on the floor.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
I mean, I don't even have a real name. I'm Cowboy Number One, so I didn't even have a real character name.
Maybe one of those things like when you talk to a reporter for 47 minutes
Yeah,
and you watch
yeah,
the news all excited that night, and there's
yeah.
like 7 seconds.
That's it.
That's half of what you said about something.
Yes, that's it. That's probably exactly what it's going to be like.
All right. Well, at least you got to do it though.
Yeah, it was fun. That,
All
that's
right.
great. Well,
All
thanks
right.
again.
Well, sure thing. And we understand, you took time out of your Sunday to be here to do this. So we understand how important people's time is. Lord knows I don't have enough time these days. And so I very much appreciate you taking the time to do this. To the audience, we know that your number one asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.